Start off this video as a little tribute to Stan Lee, and in this video I want to share my personal memories and personally for me how Stan Lee has inspired me as a person and how his creations, his story has motivated me throughout my entire life. And as we all know, we all heard the news that Stan has sadly passed away today earlier. This was something that I didn't expect to hear today. I didn't expect to hear anything like that. I was shocked. I felt like it. I personally, for me, I felt like it didn't feel like it didn't feel like something that felt right to hear, because this was something that just shocked me in general. And I mean, for many of us, we all knew that one day this was going to come, but we didn't expect it to be like this would be like the actual, this would be the actual day we would hear that news. I myself knew that one day this was going to come, and we all knew that, but we just didn't knew today was going to be that day. And in this video, I don't want to talk about how great of a person Stan was. I know a lot of people have done that on YouTube and social media. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to talk about my memories about Stan Lee and how his creations and one of his particular creations helped motivate me as a person. Now, as a kid, I remember when I first got introduced to Marvel. The first superhero that introduced me to Marvel, and I'm pretty sure everyone can agree, and that hero is Spider-Man. And I remember personally, as a kid, I wouldn't start getting into reading Spider-Man comics until I was 5 years old. But I remember as a kid, like the first superhero that I remember seeing with my own eyes, like the very first superhero that I glazed, that I fully that I would say, like, I fully knew that this character was a superhero. Like the first superhero that I glazed my eyes on, that superhero was Spider-Man. And I remember when I first remembered taking a look at Spider-Man, I was kind of like, who is this character? Like, how come he has spider powers? Like, why does he do stuff that a spider does, and why does he have all these these spider abilities? And then I realized, oh well, because that, since his name is Spider-Man, he is a superhero that has spider abilities. And I remember my first earlier memories of Spider-Man was actually watching the 90s Spider-Man show. And I remember when I watched that show growing up, I was so heavily addicted to that show that I would never in my life stop watching that. I was so heavily addicted to it that I would just keep watching it whenever it was on TV, because as a kid, that show mind blew me. And I was so heavily amazed of how a hero Spider-Man was when I would watch that show. And I remember I actually got one of the animated series DVD sets for the Spider-Man animated series. And I remember there were these special features, these special interviews. And in those interviews, it was Stan Lee. And at the time, I had no idea who Stan Lee was. I was like, who is this guy? And when I would watch these interviews, I always questioned myself, like, why does this guy feel like he's so close to Spider-Man? Like, why does he know exactly how the character interacts? And then later I realized that this guy is the man that created Spider-Man. And then I remember I would state to myself, I don't wonder why he knows so much about Spider-Man, because he created him. He created him in the first place. And I remember in those interviews, like he would talk about how, how Spider-Man as a character, helps motivate people, helps motivate kids, and I remember like he was also, because I remember in the special features, there was also one episode of the 1960s Spider-Man cartoon. That old cartoon that had that Spider-Man theme, yeah. And I remember he was talking about that little short about how the production of that animated cartoon came to be. And I remember just watching those interviews and realizing, man, like this guy knows so much stuff about Spider-Man. And then, as I realized, oh, he knows so much stuff because he created Spider-Man. And another favorite memory of mine when it came to Stan Lee was actually, I have it here. I pulled it out here when I was getting ready to do this video. And it's this Nintendo 64 Spider-Man game. Now, many will agree that this game hasn't really aged well. I only have this game physical. I don't have it complete, unfortunately. I got this at a retro video game store. But this was one of my favorite games growing up. One of my favorite third-party games on the N64. And at the time, the N64 didn't have that. They didn't have much superhero titles on the console, except for one that I don't want to talk about because we all know how that game is, if you know what I'm referring to. But yeah, but I remember when I had my N64 back in the day. I remember going to Blockbuster. Video, and I was taken there because I was gonna go get a new Nintendo 64 game. And I didn't know what game I wanted at the time. And the one that glazed my eyes was this game, Spider-Man. I remember when I actually looked at the box for the game. And it had Spider-Man, of course, on the box. And I was like, oh my god, like a Spider-Man game for the Nintendo 64. And as a kid, it blew my mind because that was like the very first time that I saw, for me, like that I saw a superhero game on a video game console. And at the time, like I didn't know that there were superhero video games. And this was, of course, my introduction to superhero video games. And I remember I got this game back in the day. I got it. I actually bought it at Blockbuster back then. Well, this is not my original copy. My original copy got lost years ago, but this one here. But I got this at a retro video game store. But I had to get it because this was one of my favorite N64 gems right here. This is actually a really good game. I really recommend checking it out. I know it hasn't aged well, but still, it's a pretty fun Spider-Man game. And I remember when I got home and I popped this into my N64, and I started a new game, of course, as you usually do when you start, when you play a new game, you start a new game. And I remember popping this into my N64, and I started a new game. And in the introduction of the game, it had the voice of none other than Stan Lee. And when I recognized this voice, I was like, oh my god, that's that same old guy that actually created Spider-Man. He's in this game. He's in this game, and he's actually the narrator for this game. He's actually guiding you through the game. And that blew my mind as a kid, because I was like, oh man, like the guy that created Spider-Man is guiding you through this game. And he's basically giving you the introductions, and he's telling you what you got to do to play this. That just mind blew me as a kid. And yeah, I mean, like that was something that excited me, because whenever I look back in this game and whenever I hear that introduction, I always remember, man, it feels like you're reading a comic book, but you're playing it in a video game. And it was just awesome. It was just awesome. It was just like one of those nostalgic feelings that you get when you pop in a new game, and it's something that you don't expect to hear, but it's like, man, like hearing that Stan Lee, that legendary Stan Lee voice in this game is simply legendary, and this is just, it's just awesome. This is like one of my most prized possessions that I have, so this is something that will always be a part of my my nerdy collection right here. So yeah, but and for me, Stan Lee has been a creator that personally, for me, that has inspired me as a person, because the one character that, of course, as I mentioned, that motivated me as a person was definitely Spider-Man. Spider-Man has been a character that has helped motivated me throughout my years as a child, as a teenager, and even as an adult to this day. Spider-Man still remains to be my favorite superhero of all time. I mean, there's no denying that. But Spider-Man is a character that when I look at, I feel like he may not be real, but he damn sure is real to me, because he is a superhero that I feel like, that, and this was like a character that was like, okay, he may be a teenager, but even if he's a teenager, he could still prove that he can be a superhero. And the quote, with great power comes great responsibility, is something that always struck me, growing up. And just, when you go back and you read that original Amazing Fantasy issue 15 comic, where that quote came, and then of course when Uncle Ben got murdered, and then when Spider-Man, went after the thief, and he decided that, what his uncle told him, with this, with great power comes great responsibility, he thought that maybe he can use that great power as a superhero and help out people. And it's a story to me that has always meant a lot to me growing up, because when I would read these comics, I always felt that these were comics that always motivated, I think, everybody out there. And, for me, but I felt like these were storylines that it's like, man, like, these are stories that you can relate to. And that, for me, these were storylines that just changed the way of how storytelling can be. I mean, no one, like back in the day, no one thinks that a kid can definitely become a superhero. And even if he has the abilities of a spider, people think that spiders don't make sense as a hero, or, having spider superpowers. I really think that only storytelling would definitely help. I think, when you tell a story of a character, then you connect with that character. Then you understand how that character came to be. Even Stan himself stated that nobody liked the idea of a guy who has spider powers being, being a superhero, or even a teenager being a superhero, because most teenagers at the time, as superheroes were viewed as sidekicks. But when you looked at Spider-Man, it was like, he doesn't have to be a sidekick. And even if he has the abilities of a spider, and even if he may not be the best looking superhero, it still proves that he could still be, a great character by telling the story of a character. And I think that has helped, impact future storylines of how I would come to know of many other superheroes from comics. And Spider-Man comics have always helped me throughout my personal problems too. Personally, to me, whenever I would read a Spider-Man comic, or whenever I would watch a Spider-Man movie, or anything Spider-Man related, it always cheered me up. It always cheered me up because this was a hero that I've always looked up to and always appreciated growing up. And it's like, you know, anything that has to do with Spider-Man related, I always get nostalgic. And personally for me, I always put a smile on my face because Spider-Man is a hero that I've always looked up to and always appreciated. And I just definitely love, you know, to this day, I mean, I even love talking about Spider-Man a lot. It's a hero that has impacted me and is a hero that I've always enjoyed reading, enjoyed watching, or, you know, just enjoying admiring. And Stan has definitely given, you know, to me, a great character that has, you know, delivered many great stories throughout the years and has helped motivated a lot of us out there. To me, when I look at Stan Lee, I look at the man that helped modernize what comic books would be. And it's true, because I feel like we're in an age of how superheroes, like, you don't just know them from comics. You can know them from any type of way. Whether if it's from comics, from movies, from TV shows, whatever the case may be. These characters have become larger than life characters. It's like these are characters that you don't just know from the pages of comics. Now you know them from everywhere. And it's all thanks to the creative mind of Stan Lee. Stan Lee has definitely produced and told many great stories, whether it was in comics, movies, or TV shows. He's done a lot impacting my life and everyone else's. And I feel like there is no denying that he definitely helped modernize the age of what comics would come to be, whether if it's Marvel, DC, whatever the case may be. I feel like he helped modernize the modern age of comic books as we all know it. And sadly, of course, I never got to meet Stan Lee in general. I wish I had the opportunity of meeting him, but I never did. But to me, he still lives on. His legacy still lives on. You know, his creations will still live on for many years. You know, and personally for me, even though I never got to meet Stan Lee himself, I can just say that I'm proud to actually, you know, to be a part of his creations. You know, getting to know everything about what comic books would get to be for me, and especially getting to know other characters like Hulk, Iron Man, Thor, you know, Fantastic Four, X-Men. I mean, all these amazing characters that I come to know, and all these other stories that have definitely set the bar for what comics have come to be. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. And Stan, I mean, you left a huge legacy out there. You left a huge legacy out there. Your legacy will never be forgotten. It'll always live on through the hearts of millions out there, myself and everyone. You've inspired and you set the bar for all of our lives. You impacted us as people as well. Not just because of the characters that you created, but of the stories that you've gone to tell for years and years and years. And we'll never forget that. We'll never forget that. And personally, I want to say thank you for your contributions to the comic book industry. And also, you created a hero that many people, that it's not a hero that a lot of people may look up to, you know, but this is a hero that proves that you don't have to be, you know, you don't have to be the best looking hero, or, you know, or you have to be like the toughest hero out there. But this is a hero that has helped motivated me, and knowing that a superhero can be, you know, a superhero can be whatever, you know, the case may be, whether it's a teenager, whether it has spider powers or whatnot. A superhero doesn't have to look cool. The only way to know if a superhero can be cool is, you know, by just appreciating, you know, the design. Well, not just the design of the character, but also, of course, the story of the character. And I definitely think Stan Lee helped truly visualize that. And I want to say thank you, Stan. Thank you for what you've helped done for our lives, for what you've helped contributing, and your legacy will never be forgotten. You will definitely be missed. And of course, as always, excelsior.
You know, I guess one person can make a difference. Enough said.